Emmerdale teased that John Sugden, his lips curling into a triumphant smile, had whispered into Ross Barton's ear the precise scale of the drugs he'd purloined, enough to choke half the Yorkshire dales in a haze of betrayal. The dusk light spilled through the grimy windows of the Woolpack, painting both men in an amber glow that seemed to set their tempers alight. Ross's jaw clenched so hard the knuckles bleached white. Every slow breath he drew trembled with wrath. John leaned back against the bar, arms folded, relishing the storm rolling across Ross's face. In that charged moment, Ross's fury took shape, an animal's reflex unleashed against the nearest target bearing the scent of treachery. By the time Ross found Robert Sugden in the deserted alley behind the cafe, his eyes were red with anger and the echo of John's revelation still a-roaring in his ears. He didn't ask questions. He didn't wait for explanations. Instead, he struck, first with a brutal shove that sent Robert staggering into the damp brick wall, then with a flurry of fists that landed with sickening thuds. The sound of skin against flesh punctuated the night as Ross demanded, "Where's the rest of it? Those drugs you pinched, give them back." Robert's hands came up to protect his temple, voice hoarse with shock. I don't have it, Ross. You've got it wrong." But Ross heard only the lie in every tremor of Robert's words, and he battered him again, each blow a question unanswered, each punch a demand for restitution. When Ross finally withdrew, panting and savage, he left Robert slumped against the wall, bruised and bewildered. But John Sugden, a wolf in human skin, stood in the shadows nearby, a predator savoring its kill. He drummed his fingertips against the cold brick, grin widening as he watched Ross's savage display. At last, Robert lay still, beaten into reluctant acquiescence. John's triumphant voice drifted down. "Should have known better than to steal from your own family." And just like that, Robert's investigation into John's darker dealings halted, replaced by the necessity of self-preservation. He would need to recover before he could think again of justice. Yet Robert's mind, even through the haze of pain, circled back to a more insidious betrayal. From the moment he'd first crossed paths with John, his plans had been mysteriously compromised. Conversations he'd held in the privacy of his own home had surfaced in the mouths of rivals. Sensitive information vanished as if whisked away by ghosts. There were no leaks in his circle, only the suspected whisper of hidden microphones. The unsettling realization struck him like a punch to the gut. Someone was listening. With calm determination born of desperation, Robert conducted a thorough sweep of his residence under cover of night. He crawled behind bookcases and beneath floorboards, fingers trembling when they brushed against a tiny black capsule taped behind the skirting board. The bug's red lead flickered faintly, betraying its purpose. Heart pounding, Robert removed it, closing his hand around the device as if it were a snake poised to strike. He tucked it into his pocket, mind reeling with confirmation. John Sugden had laid this trap. But Robert would not remain prey. In the subsequent nights, Robert laid his own cunning plans. He procured a similar listening device, daubed it with fresh adhesive, and bided his time. Then, under the cover of one storm-lashed evening, he infiltrated John's secluded farmhouse on the outskirts of Emmerdale. Thieves in the quiet hours of darkness found no greater joy than planting seeds of discord. The bug slipped beneath the ornate sideboard in John's living room, nestled among family photos and hunting trophies, voyeurs in the very heart of John's sanctuary. Meanwhile, John continued to maneuver his pieces across the village chessboard. His delight at Robert's downfall had masked his own vulnerability, for John's empire teetered on secrets, so dark they would shake Emmerdale to its foundations if fully revealed. And yet he exuded confidence, certain that he could outwit any challenge. He poked the sleeping lion, provoking Ross's wrath, and now Robert was weakened, battered, his focus fractured between physical recovery and the shadow game of espionage. Robert, however, embraced his dual roles, injured detective and unseen spy. He pored over every whispered snippet captured in John's living room, cataloguing revelations, as though they were clues left deliberately for him to find. He heard John's voice, low and conspiratorial, promising Ross a supply that would keep him loyal, and muttering dark threats, should anyone dare probe too deeply into his affairs. In the flicker of the recording, Robert glimpsed the outline of murderous intent, the edges sharpened by greed and fear. Yet action required proof. Convinced that unmasking John's crimes would vindicate him, Robert reached out to Cain Dingle, his half-brother hardened by years of his own entanglements with Emmerdale's underbelly. Cain, a man who knew better than most the price of secrets, listened as Robert laid out the scheme: bugs beneath floorboards, betrayals among friends, a drug empire woven into the fabric of village life. Cain's response was measured, a slow nod betraying both skepticism and intrigue. "You got the goods?" Cain asked, voice gravelly. "'Cause if we move right. No mistakes." Before Robert could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from Steve MacDonald, terse and official: the police wanted to see him. Concern knotted Robert's stomach. He'd been digging into Owen and Nate's suspicious deaths, convinced there was more to the official line than the records reflected. Armed only with half-formed theories and rumor, he'd leveled allegations against Steve, insinuating negligence or worse. Now, the constabulary warned him against making unsubstantiated claims, reminding him that defamation carried consequences. "Bring proof," they'd said. "Or stay silent." Robert stepped into the station's cold foyer, remembering the hollow thump of Ross's fists, the oppressive weight of John's betrayal, and the betrayal by those he sought to protect. Det Sergeant Harper slid a file across the desk. "These are serious allegations, Mr. Sugden. If you can't substantiate them, you'll face charges yourself." The reprimand echoed in Robert's mind like a judge's gavel. He left, clutching the file, resolve hardening into steel. Proof, he needed irrefutable proof. That night, Robert coded a list of targets. John's illicit transactions, Ross's furtive movements, Steve's concealed connection to the deceased. Each thread would be unwound methodically, tied and retied until the tapestry of corruption was revealed. But as he plotted, news came that John had slipped once more through the village's watchful gaze. The pill-shaded moon bore witness to John's escape, a silhouette vanishing into the mist, leaving behind only the echo of his smug laughter. Powerless rage churned within Robert's chest. John's reach was long, his allies silent, his next move unpredictable. The village, that tranquil facade of rolling hills and cozy cottages, throbbed with hidden violence. And Robert knew that if he did not act swiftly, John would bury him under an avalanche of lies, frame him for crimes he had not committed, and emerge untouchable. In the pale hours before dawn, Robert stood at the edge of Cain's farmyard, breathing in the damp air. He glanced at his phone. One unplayed voicemail from Ross, another from the police. He tightened his grip on the recorder containing John's recorded confessions. Then, stepping into the shadows of ancient barns and silent tractors, he whispered to himself, "I'll expose you, John Sugden. And when I do, Emmerdale will never be the same." Dawn's pale light crept over the crest of the dales as Robert Sugden and Cain Dingle slipped from the shadows of the farmyard toward John Sugden's isolated farmhouse. Every footfall echoed of determination, every breath tasted of resolve. Behind them stretched the black ribbon of roadway leading back to Emmerdale, but neither brother paused to look. Instead, they advanced into John's lair, equipped with Robert's clandestine recordings and Cain's uncanny gift for intimidation. Inside, John Sugden lounged in his study, unaware that his carefully constructed world teetered on the edge of collapse. He had reveled in Robert's disgrace, had prided himself on his potency in that brutal ambush orchestrated through Ross Barton, and yet the rug beneath his feet quivered now. A gust of wind rattled the window panes, and for a heartbeat, John paused in his sinuous plotting. He sensed the gathering storm, but not its true magnitude. Robert and Kane moved through the house like shadows, Kane's broad figure concealing Robert's slender form. They planted the recorder in plain sight atop John's desk, then retreated silently to a vantage point in the hallway. From there, they listened, straining to catch the slightest intonation that would crumble John's facade. Footsteps approached. John entered the room, flipping on the desk lamp. The warm glow revealed the recorder, blinking softly with life. He paused, mask of utter nonchalance sliding into place, and touched it almost absent-mindedly. "Well, now," he murmured, voice smooth as oil. "How curious." In his mind, John spun possibilities. Perhaps Ross had betrayed him again, perhaps the police had found a lead. But he could never imagine that Robert, his own kin, had turned the tables so deftly. A slow smile curved on his lips. Impressed by Robert's audacity, he decided to play along, to bait them further. "Kane Dingle," John called without looking up. "Come in here, mate. I'll need your advice." Kane emerged from the hall, arms crossed, eyes flicking from John's face to the recording device. "You've been busy," he remarked. "Bug in your own house, of all things." John shrugged, leaning back in the leather chair. "Necessary precaution," he replied. "One can never be too careful." Beneath the veneer of calm, his heart pounded. He needed to unravel their scheme before it gained traction. Meanwhile, Robert and Kane withdrew to the top of the stairs, hidden by darkness. Robert's hand pressed against Kane's arm. "Get ready," he whispered. "When I give the word." Downstairs, John continued, feigning ignorance. "I thought someone was snooping. But then I found this delightful little gift. Now, I'm wondering who's listening." He tapped the device again. Behind him, Kane's eyes gleamed, but he held his tongue. John would confess enough, they just needed to capture it all. At the precise moment, Robert flicked the recorder's microphone switch to record manually through his remote. Below, John spoke into the unsuspecting microphone, unaware it had been commandeered. "Ross and I will be meeting at the old quarry tonight. He'll bring the haul. Then we move the shipment through the mill road, clean, no prying eyes. You'll handle collection from there." Each syllable tumbled into the recorder, carving John's guilt in black and white. The longer John spoke, the more his self-assurance slipped. He divulged payment details, named the crooked officer who'd look the other way, even hinted at unsettling plans to expand his reach into Steve McDonald's legitimate taxi operations. Plans William Dingle once whispered were too bold. Robert's breath caught at each new transgression. Kane's knuckles whitened as he gripped the railing. By the time John rose, stretching languidly, his unwitting confession was complete. He flipped off the lamp and strolled out into the hall, colliding almost comically with Robert. The two men froze, John's surprise flickering across his face in a heartbeat. Kane thundered down the stairs behind Robert, hands balled into fists. Before John could react, Kane hauled him forward, pinning him against the banister. "Thought you were clever, eh?" Kane snarled. "Thought you could play us for fools." John's eyes darted between the two brothers, realization dawning like frost on a window pane. Robert stepped into the light, recorder clutched like a weapon. "I have every word you said," he announced, voice steady despite the adrenaline crackling in his veins. "Every plan. Every lie." John's lips twisted into a sneer. "You think you can blackmail me?" he hissed. "I built this empire from nothing. You haven't an ounce of proof that'll stand." Robert raised the recorder. "Watch me." He pressed the play button. John's own voice boomed through the little speaker, uncompromising, damning. The details of tonight's rendezvous, the names of thugs, the police payoff, they poured out, exposing John's underworld connections. John's face drained of color. His eyes flicked to Kane's, frantic for rescue. This is betrayal, family, his voice cracked. Kane let him slide to the floor. You brought this on yourself, Kane growled. You stabbed your brother in the back, and now you'll pay. Outside, the distant hum of an engine approached. Ross Barton's black hatchback slid into view beneath the old oak tree. He stepped out, muscles coiled, ready for business. Instead, he found Robert holding the recorder aloft like a trophy, Kane looming at his side, and John cowering. Ross's brow furrowed. What's going on? He demanded. Robert turned. This ends tonight. You thought you'd beat me. You tied me up in knots, physically, legally. You nearly got me arrested with those accusations about Owen and Nate. You sent Ross to beat me up. But I've got the evidence, you arranging drug deals, paying off cops, planning to betray me and Brian's memory. Ross's eyes narrowed. He glanced at John, then at Kane. Is this true? He asked John. John's gaze fell. He spoke through clenched teeth. You heard it all. Ross's fury flared anew. He strode to John, seizing him by the collar. You lied to me, he spat, and you used my loyalty against me. Kane stepped between them. Enough, he barked. We've got what we came for. Ross's shoulders sagged as the full weight of betrayal settled in. He looked to Robert. Guess we're even, he muttered, voice haunted. Together, the four men left John's house, John stumbling behind them. They drove in tense silence to the police station in Emmerdale, Ross behind the wheel, Kane riding shotgun, Robert in back with the recorder and John. Inside the station, Det Sergeant Harper looked up in surprise. Mr. Sugden. Mr. Dingle. His gaze flicked to Ross, then to John. I thought. Robert placed the recorder on the desk. It's all here, he said. Every conversation. Every conspiracy. He pressed play. The speakers heralded John's own words. Detectives exchanged stunned looks as the truth poured forth. In the days that followed, John Sugden was arrested on multiple counts: drug trafficking, bribery, conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. The villagers of Emmerdale gawked at the headlines as the Dale's quiet tenor shattered. At the Woolpack, Ross and Robert sat together in uneasy truce, nursing pints of bitter. Ross's knuckles were still scarred, Robert's ribs still aching, but both wore the hard gleam of survivors. Kane Dingle lounged nearby, scowling at no one in particular. Family's complicated, he said, swirling his beer. But sometimes you gotta break a few bones to set things right. Robert nodded, lips pressed tight. I'll need to clear my name next, he added. Those allegations about Owen and Nate, they were mine. I'll present the proof I've also gathered. He tapped his phone, where a second set of recordings lay. Private interviews, scrutinized documents, and a piece of forensic analysis hinting at a cover-up in the original coroner's report. Ross's expression softened. Just tell me one thing, he said. Are we actually brothers again? Robert managed a half-smile. We'll see. Meanwhile, Steve MacDonald paced outside the taxi office, phone pressed to his ear. He'd been blindsided by rumors that Robert had implicated him in Owen's death. Now, with John's empire exposed, Steve worried that his own reputation teetered on the brink. He needed evidence to clear his name. Or a powerful ally. He dialed Kane. You got a minute? He asked when Kane answered. I think I can help Robert, if he'll let me. Kane paused, eyeing the countryside beyond his window. Might be useful, he conceded. Bring your proof, and we'll talk. As news spread through the village, the Dingles and Sugdens convened at home farm. Charity Dingle, Kane's former partner and optometrist of secrets, inspected Robert's recorder with a critical eye. She had once loved Cain's fire, but understood truth's delicate blade. "You did well," she told Robert. "But this is only the beginning. John's network extends deeper, into Harrogate, Leeds. You've got to be ready." Robert inhaled sharply. "I know. I'm ready." Outside, Ross Barton leaned against his car, watching the sun dip behind the hills. In his pocket lay the final payment John had promised him, a small ledger with coded entries. Ross didn't yet know whether he'd tear it up, or follow it to its end. But one thing was certain. Emmerdale would never return to its former calm. That night, as the first stars blinked awake, Ross, Robert, Cain, and Steve met in hushed conference in the back room at the Woolpack. Maps, ledgers, audio files, and phone transcripts littered the table like battlefield plans. Each man contributed his piece to the puzzle. Ross brought John's payment ledger, still smeared with tobacco ash and Ross's fingerprints. Robert delivered his coroner's addendum, hinting at toxicology results suppressed from public view. Cain produced a list of John's offshore accounts, names that linked Lars Vik's shipping magnate and a Breton drug lord. Steve read from his own phone, a string of text messages between John and a detective sergeant in Leeds. They spoke in low voices, each aware that one misstep would bring John's henchmen, or worse, corrupt officers, down upon them. But unity lent strength. After all, they were bound by blood, by betrayal, and by the promise of justice. As the clock ticked toward midnight, Robert raised his glass. "To Emmerdale," he began, voice steady but heavy. "May it be cleansed of darkness." Ross, Cain, and Steve clinked their glasses. In their eyes burned a common fire, determination to see John's network dismantled, to restore peace to their home, and to avenge those who had suffered. Outside, wind rattled the windows, as though the village itself trembled in anticipation of the coming storm. Unseen, a car idled outside with headlights off. Through the tinted window, a pair of eyes watched the backroom meeting. The engine hummed quietly, waiting to spring into life at the beckoning of an unseen master. And somewhere beyond the hills, John Sugden, smarting from his defeat, whispered into the phone of a cellmate, promising that his revenge would be swift and merciless, "And trust me," he growled, "I always deliver." In Emmerdale's moonlit night, alliances formed and secrets unfurled. Justice lurked in the hush between breaths, and danger pulsed in the darkness beyond the drawn curtains. For in that fragile peace, the next move could come from any side, and the Dale's fate would hang on the razor's edge of one final betrayal.